Starting into our programs, plans, and strategies, I want you to notice this picture here. This is soybeans that are planted in 3 rows 15 inches apart across a cane bed. If you notice there on the left, soybeans are quite healthy. Soybeans there on the right, they're not healthy. Now I put this picture in here specifically to tell you this story. A grower who was a sugarcane farmer as well as a soybean farmer was spraying his sugarcane, and it came time to spray his soybeans, and he did a poor job of cleaning out his spray tank. So what you see here on the right is where he began to spray. He had a herbicide that will kill soybeans, but labeled for use in sugarcane, that was in the tank. He didn't properly clean it out, so thus he injured his soybeans. So all plans, programs, and strategies can be thrown into a loop if you don't practice good and proper sanitation. So not only does it apply to the weeds, getting them off your equipment, but also to cleaning out your tanks, which we'll have further discussions with that in the future. The first principle of a program, plan, or strategy in soybeans is that what you do from a herbicide point of view depends upon the weed spectrum. There is no one size fits all. There is no one herbicide you can go and spray that'll take care of everything. Contrary to belief, glyphosate or Roundup will not control every weed that's in a field. Now it controls a good number of them, but it won't control all of them. Because here in the state of Louisiana, we have more, though slang is more weeds than you can shake a stick at. But the point is our growers at any one time in the soybean season could have anywhere from 2 to 4 different grass species that are weeds that he has to deal with in his soybean field. Anywhere from 2 to 8 broadleaf weed species that he has to deal with. Now, you have to understand and know what is in that field, that weed spectrum, before you can choose a program of herbicide. You don't willy-nilly go out and just pick a herbicide and spray and expect it to work. You've got to understand that and know. As I pointed out, you may have majority grasses, majority broadleafs, which species of grass. I mean, a lot of these herbicides are specific as to what herbicide they will control. Some herbicides, as I pointed out, are very strong, and some are weak on certain species. Now, I'm going to give us some givens, so we got to have a jumping off point. Soybeans are typically planted in Louisiana from late March to mid-June. You have full season crop that's late March to mid-May, then a double crop following wheat, which is in June. And here's some couple of pictures. You can picture on the right growing in wheat stubble, the one on the left is more of a full season soybean. Planting dates set up many decisions for us. And really that depends on when the weeds are going to emerge. So understanding when they come up can really dictate to you what your herbicide program will be, but it is not more important than what the weed spectrum is. It's just another piece of the puzzle that you have to have as you begin to help growers design weed management practices. First thing you have to start with, which is the most important, is pre-plant burn down. Now, in Louisiana, we honestly don't get cold enough to completely stop all winter growth. The picture you see in the background is henbit that is completely covered in field. This is in March of a year. Now for growers getting ready to plant, you can see that that would be virtually impossible to plant to. Number one, he'd have physical competition with his soybeans. And then number two, you could have insect issues. The other captions, the pictures that are all around there, those are just a few weeds that we have to deal with here in the state of Louisiana that can be competitive with our soybean crop if not properly controlled. So you have competition for water and nutrients that are required for soybean emergence, and then these weeds also harbor insects and diseases. Now I'm not going to get into specifically what insect and what disease, but understand that it's just the problem with weeds without a proper burn down is just not a physical competition with the crop. You've got all three facets of pest management, from the weeds and the insects and diseases. That's why we have to practice good IPM, which this next slide will talk about. Now our recommendation, which is developed amongst the weed scientists as well as the entomologists, is a grower absolutely should burn down his crop 4 to 6 weeks before he plants. So whether you use tillage, whether you use a herbicide, and really that's the only two ways that you're going to control the winter weed in this standpoint is tillage or herbicide, at least 4 to 6 weeks. And this next information to show you. This is some information developed by our entomologists with LSU AgCenter. This is the effect of burn down timing on cutworm population and cotton stand. It still applies to soybeans even though it says cotton. On the y-axis, 0 to 6 is the number of cutworms per 60 feet. Across the bottom is weeks prior to planting. 6, 4, 2, and 1 as we get closer to planting. The bar in the green, the one across the top with the triangles, is cutworm larvae, and then the inner row skips. So how many missing plants do we have? Now notice this. If we burn down 4 to 6 weeks before planting, we have virtually no cutworms and virtually no skips in our stand. All right, so we've done what we should do. So we delayed to get closer to planting. Our cutworm numbers increased as well as reduced our plant stand. So we see now, I'm going to talk to you about physical competition, but now our entomologists are together with us so that we've got to burn down these weeds early. And the saying that we use for that is break the green bridge. You've got to have dead tissue out there at a minimum 2 weeks. So 2 weeks before a grower plants, it needs to be brown and dead. Everything is dead. Why? So those cutworms and other insects will move on to find the greener pastures. And when you plant your soybean crop, they're not there to start costing that grower money. Herbicide choice typically in the state of Louisiana is a glyphosate plus 2,4-D burn down. Now, many times growers will add a residual herbicide with it, so they've got the glyphosate and the 2,4-D, which is the foliar activity. It kills what's there. They'll tank mix or co-apply a residual herbicide that will prevent more weeds from germinating from the point of application up to planting. So that's another principle, but the choice of residual herbicide really depends on the weed spectrum and what crop. And that's where, the information from the LSU AgCenter weed scientist, or just through some study, we could discuss and figure it out. But here's an example. There on the left is a non-treated, where a grower was getting ready to plant soybeans, would not recommend it. There on the right is just 2 weeks after treatment, and he's getting ready to plant. Point is, this grower delayed his application timing too long. So if he would have sprayed 4 to 6 weeks before planting, that would have been bare dirt. If I'd have showed you that picture, it would have been a beautiful set of rows ready to plant soybeans on. So this field will more likely require a second burn down application. As we're moving into planting, so we've got burn down. We know we got to start clean. So now we're moving into our planting. What we got to do? The whole point is, and this feeds back to what I just said about burn down, start clean. If weeds have emerged after your burn down, so a grower chose not to use a residual herbicide, just a glyphosate 2,4-D or something similar to that, they have weeds emerge before they plant, you need to apply a non-selective herbicide, for example, paraquat, which is sold by Syngenta as gramoxone and sold by various other trade names. Here we go. Paraquat is the common name. Gramoxone is the trade name. You got to understand the common names, all right? To kill that vegetation. So example, that picture in the bottom right shows you that this field actually needs an additional application. So he burned down with glyphosate 2,4-D, so they were getting ready to plant. They should at least apply a non-selective herbicide to kill that tissue to make sure. Now, is there cutworms out there? Possibly. Could they possibly hurt your yield? Yes, or your plant stand. That's where we would need to talk to our entomologist to see is there something that could be done for the possible cutworms that are out in this field. And then we started clean, now we got to stay clean. Early season weed control in soybeans is the most critical to maximize yield. Honestly, and I'm going to show you some data here in this point. It's not a matter of controlling the weeds when the beans are waist high. Controlling weeds, yeah. You've got to control the weeds early season. That is absolutely the most important. Early season weed competition will rob your yield, and it's very, very important. So let's talk about this data that was generated here in Louisiana. On the left side, from 0 to 100 is percent of the weed-free soybean yield. So if these soybeans' maximum yield was 70 bushels, that 100% implies 70 bushels. Along the bottom axis is the number of weeks that I maintain soybeans weed-free. I maintain them for 0, I got no yield, so I let the weeds compete all year. If I only kept them clean for 1 week, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, you see how yield increases. So look at 5 weeks. 5 weeks is 100% of the maximum yield. Point is that if you maintain soybeans here in the state of Louisiana weed-free for the first 5 weeks after emergence, you have the best chance of maximizing yield. All right? Now, what that tells you is that I have maintained control of insects. I've maintained control of my diseases. I've got proper growing conditions. Those are things that I don't control. I only look at the weeds. But the point is, if you don't control weeds for the first 5 weeks after emergence, I don't care how many insects you spray for late season. I don't care how many diseases you spray for late season. I don't care how many herbicide applications you make late season. You have lost money by not controlling those weeds in the first 5 weeks after emergence. But the beauty is we've got excellent tools to do this.